Hey all, Binks here, and welcome to Binks Bants, our weekly show where we talk about everything Marvel Snap. We have a lot to get over today, but the first thing is going to be our featured section. We're going to be talking about 5 cards the community got dead wrong. It's really interesting having been a part of this community from the very beginning and being able to see all of these different cards and look at what we thought they were going to be into what they became, and a lot of that comes from nerfs and buffs, but sometimes we're just completely wrong with cards when they come out, and we think that the card's either going to be trash and it ends up being amazing, or the card's going to be amazing and it ends up being trash. We're going to talk about 5 of the most crazy cases that we have seen that, starting, of course, with Blob. Blob now is a 6/0 that can get up to 13 power, but when Blob was released, it started as a 6/4 and it ate every card in your deck. So it would just gobble up every single thing that's in your deck, and it would get just absolutely massive, bigger than anything else in the game. And when this card was coming out, people really didn't think it would be that good. People just kind of like looked at it as like this big bomb card that you can play at the end, but they didn't really think about how like eating all of the power in your deck works. I was actually one of the few people who was pretty high on this card, however, for the wrong reasons. I kind of thought this card would be like a ramp style card back when like Electro Wave style ramp existed. I feel like you could just like wave into a blob and then use like a Taskmaster or a Zola on it, and you had these really, really giant cards that can just really, really go super, super big. But where this card ended up being absolutely broken was in both Arishem and in Thanos, being able to just eat every single card that's in there. And Blob has changed a bunch of times. It was still really broken as a 6/0 that would get like up to, I believe, 20 power was the first iteration, or maybe up to 16. It also used to have this ongoing. It had the ongoing can't be moved, which is a very, very like blob thing. Like that's his whole thing, is that he can't move at all, no matter how hard you hit him or push him. There's one of the very few cards that had an on reveal and an ongoing, but this actually led to some weird problems where you could use both Absman and Mystique to copy your own blob. So basically, Arishem would be able to play Blob on turn 5 because it had the extra energy, and then as long as it found either Mystique or Absman, could play a second version of Blob. This wasn't where it ate the whole deck. This is where it would the second iteration where it got a lot. So this card came out and it was just absolutely bonkers broken. But the community thought it was not going to be good. I think a lot of people were saying this card would just be meh, but it was so unbelievably broken that it had to change so many times to get it into a place and completely remove its like ongoing can't be moved identity. Really interesting to think that we thought that this card would not be good. We didn't really think of all the edge cases, but a very, very funny card to look back on how crazy it was when it originally dropped. The next card is Legion. Now you might think Legion, it's a kind of a staple. It's been in a lot of decks and it is a very powerful ability. But when Legion was coming out, everyone thought this was going to be a meme card. I swear there was like Blob, there was a couple people like I thought it was going to be kind of good, but I thought it was going to be good in a weird way. With Legion, like everyone thought this card was going to be a complete meme. I think that people would look at Legion and just think it would just be similar like Scarlet Witch, or like the card that comes out of Snowguard, the Snowguard Hawk, which like turns off locations. And you're putting that on a 5 energy card, like it's just so expensive. But really where Legion is incredibly powerful is being able to like completely warp the game based on what you end up hitting. It's also had some really nasty combos with things like Storm that we've seen over the years. But when Legion came out, everyone thought this was going to be a meme. It actually got buffed right before it came out to 5/8. I think partially maybe even because of the community sentiment that everyone was thinking was going to be really, really bad. But then Legion came out and quickly people realized just how powerful this effect was. It ended up getting nerfed almost immediately to 5/7 where it sits now. Now with like power creep, it's just like a very powerful card. But Legion is like the one that I always think of when like people ask about cards that are coming out and the community and if they're right about everything. And Legion is just one where every single person thought this card was going to be a meme. And it ended up being one of the strongest cards in the game at 5/8, and at 5/7, it is still really, really powerful in a lot of different decks. And there's a really funny thing because Legion came out at the exact same time, I think a 2-week difference, with our next card, which is Jean Grey. There was actually a clip of me and Ben Brode talking right before both these cards came out. and I was mentioning like a group of cards, and I think I said specifically, I think one card everyone thinks is going to be amazing, and one card is a meme, which was thinking that Jean Grey was going to be this broken, very hard to beat card, and Legion was going to be this meme card, and it ended up being completely swapped. Where Jean Grey came out and everyone thought that it was going to be this terror that everyone needed to get their hands on because it's going to be so disruptive. At the end of the day, the card just doesn't feel that bad. I think that the way that it like disrupts you, people were a little bit too generous on how strong it was going to be. I think maybe we didn't think about the ways where like if you fill it with a card that can move, you can still play in other lanes and then move things around. It was the edge cases, but when Jean Grey was coming out as a 3/3, I think every single person that month that came out with Legion, but Legion is one of the worst cards for the month, and Jean Grey is one of the best cards, and it was completely flipped on its head. You know, Jean Grey coming out as a 3/3, it's since been buffed to a 3/4, and you do not see this card anywhere because the effect is just not that powerful. It's something that we were so terrified of as a community for coming out. We were really hoping that they would like immediately nerf it. I heard people calling for, but ended up just being a card that saw very little play, sometimes got buffed up, and still has seen no play at all. So always remember when we're looking at these cards ahead of time, sometimes effects that look crazy broken in practice aren't that crazy. This is going to bring us to our next card, which I think is a really fun one. Grandmaster, which actually released as a 2/0. And people were really hyped on this card. This one wasn't as like unanimous as I think the first three cards were, but there was a lot of people who were really scared about what Grandmaster would bring to the table at a 2/0, thinking, you know, it's like Absman, but only 2 cost. It can enable all these combo decks. But when the card came out, it just became so clear how hard it is to get this effect off in a way that's going to be like really important to your combo. So you had to have the card played on the side and then have it move to the middle, and you can't have multiple on reveal cards there. I think there was still a few times where Grandmaster has found some pretty cool play when it was like at this level. Now as a 2/3, because it's not such a low tempo play of playing a 2/0, you can sometimes just play it out early, and it's not that bad when it fails or hits the wrong card because you're still getting a 2/3 of it and you're still repeating some kind of on reveal. But it is crazy that we were so scared of this card as a 2/0, and it took multiple buffs to get it to see play. Even a 2/2 was seeing very, very little play. But once you get to that 2/3 threshold where it's a card that is a little bit easier to play and not feel bad from a tempo perspective, completely fine. So this is like another example of, I think, the community being really scared of the ceiling of a card, because Grandmaster repeating an on reveal, you know, if it's a very powerful on reveal, can be very daunting and very scary. But then when you actually see it in practice and you feel how weird it is to have to hold this card in hand and then set up the card and then have it go off, only being a 2/0, it was just really, really not great. And we're going to move on to our final card, which is another pat on my own back, because this is one of the cards that I was very, very adamant that people should get, and it took a long time for the community to kind of catch up with. And that's Red Guardian, which is now a 3/2. Red Guardian was originally released back in April of 2024 as a 3/3 with the on reveal, afflict the lowest power enemy card worth -2 power and remove its text. And people weren't super excited about it. It seemed like okay, and everyone was just like, yeah, this card is fine. But I think that people really underestimated the fact that this is a meta-dependent card. So it kind of just depends on what the meta looks like for how powerful Red Guardian actually is. If there's a lot of 2-drops that people are playing that can get Red Guardian, it's really, really good. There's not that much, and there's not that much like ambiguity for low power and high value like ongoing effects. It didn't end up being that good. But Red Guardian was one of those cards where everyone was kind of like, I don't know if you should get this, but I was very adamant. I said like, hey, there's not too many tech cards in this game. And of all the tech cards, this might be the most efficient. You know, it was a 3/5 pretty much every time. Even if you just had to play it on a 3, very often they were going to have a card out. Playing cards on 1 and 2, I think, was way more common back in 2024 when this card came out. And I just don't think that the cards that were really getting hit bad by Red Guardian existed then. And it just very quickly, after the first couple of weeks of people, you know, not really thinking it's that good, a lot of people passing up on it, Then you start to get like there was a lot of Angela decks that were going around, and your opponent plays Angela, you can play Red Guardian on top of it, stop their whole game plan of boosting up the power of this card, and you're just way ahead on turn 3. So this was like, I think that tech cards in general are the hardest things to assess when they come out, because in general, we're going to assess a card based on the current meta, right? And if a card is just like a purely powerful card that you can build a deck around, and a card that you can kind of form your deck around, and you know that it can create that much power, very easy to know, is this card going to be really good, or is this card going to be okay? But when a tech card comes out, it kind of like lands in this weird position where if it's not really meta relevant when it comes out, that doesn't mean the card isn't going to be incredibly meta relevant at a different time. I think Red Guardian was a really good case of this. I saw it as just a tech card that you can just kind of throw into almost any deck as like a 3-5 base stats, if you count the -2 power that comes over to your opponent's side, and could be really good in the future. And a lot of people looked at it as, oh, this isn't really good right now. I don't think this is a very good card. But I think especially with tech cards, or cards that are pretty meta defined. I mean, we've seen like Echo. Like Echo is one of those cards that came out, was terrible when it first came out. But every once in a while, Echo comes out as this really nasty little tech card that you can play against certain things. We saw in like the Miss Marvel meta, Echo getting played in the middle lane kind of really just threw a lot of things out when Miss Marvel was so incredibly popular. I think tech cards are always really interesting, but it was so fun going through and trying to find these 5 cards for things that we were completely wrong about. The Blob one still blows me away, because like if you look at a 6/4 that eats your whole deck, gains your entire deck's power, and then also can't be moved. It was really funny when this came out. Actually, Cannonball came out right afterwards, and the ongoing effect actually made it so Cannonball always killed it. But like Legion was probably like, if I'm looking for 2 cards that are like a mainstay for like everyone thought this card was going to be bad and it was good, it's Legion. And then 2 weeks later, a card that everyone thought was going to be broken and ended up being bad was Jean Grey. But very fun to go through and go over all these, and I hope that you enjoyed a little trip down memory lane, showing you that content creators, community members, we can all be incredibly wrong about things. Always try and make sure to use your own mind and try and assess things on your own, as opposed to just asking others which cards you should get. I think that it's a really good skill that you can grow. So let's talk about other things that we're going to be jumping into today. So we talked about 5 cards the community got dead wrong. We have Weapon H, and usually I'd be doing this on Mondays, so I'd be able to just preview this card. But really with Weapon H, I've already got a good chance to play it, so I'm going to give you a rundown of the first couple of days of it. Then we're going to also go over last week card changes. We have Weapon X, Adamantium Infusion, Wade Wilson, Chamber, and talking about some things that I liked and disliked from the OTA. And then finally, we're going to be talking about Snap news and updates, talking about Grand Arena that came out. So let's start with Weapon H, a 7 energy, 14 power card with the ability, when discarded, put this back with -2 cost. That's this week's Series 5 cards that just came out. And initially, I didn't really think the card felt super powerful. In my initial deck that I built with it, I built like a Black Knight deck, and it felt like a pretty good card to have in Black Knight. I just don't think that Black Knight is a very good deck right now. So I was a little bit off with it, but then I ended up building like a tempo style discard deck where you're using things like Corvus and Zombie Power Man to just like discard your cards like crazy. And then you have Khonshu to be able to revive cards that you didn't want to discard, to put them back into play. And you have like Swarms and all these different things to just get a bunch of results from discarding, just aimlessly discarding as many cards as you can out of your hand. Because we kind of have hit that critical mass. In that previous style of deck, Weapon H would be replaced with Wolverine probably. Wolverine is just not that powerful. It's a 5 power card that lands on the board when it gets discarded. Much better in Destroy when you can do it multiple times. But with Weapon H, it really, if you get 2 discards on Weapon H, a 3/14 is an insanely scary card to go up against, right? Like going up against the 3/14 that they can land in any lane while playing like multiple other cards becomes a real terror. So I don't know. I'm feeling pretty up on this card. I think that if you're a discard enjoyer who likes playing a lot of different discard decks, you should go after it. If you're a discard enjoyer who really only like pigeonholes on like the main style of discard or into like a Dakin style of discard, I don't think this card really fits into either of those. I think that it definitely more goes into like a very new tempo style of discard deck that has seen some play, but I think it's kind of hit critical mass with this card. Really, really fun, pretty powerful card. And then also today I was running a Doctor Doom like Cersei deck where you ramp up to Sarah on 4, then very often would you play Doctor Doom on 5, and then you could Cersei the Doom bots. And now with Weapon H, there's 3 good hits at 7 and 2 bad hits at 7. So there's Zombie Galacti and Erishim, but now Weapon H makes it Weapon H, Dormammu, and Scar that can hit for 7. So it actually increased and made that deck a lot better than I played today, which is kind of interesting. But Weapon H, I think it goes into a very narrow style of deck, and that deck might not be good a lot of times. So it's a pretty narrow card. Maybe there's more to it that I'm not really seeing, but in general, a very, very awesome addition to your collection and to the game. Let's go back to the Season Pass card, Weapon X, a 2 energy 2 power with the ability after one of your other cards is destroyed +1 power. After every third time, improve this effect by 1. One thing I do want to talk about with this card is that I love this idea of a effect that compounds and gets better over time. I hope they continue to do that because I think that that's a really, really interesting way that the game can kind of progress to give you a kind of exponential level of reward for Weapon X. Like Weapon X, if you get 3 discards, it's 6, but then if you get 9 discards, it's like, what would that be? +6, +9, +15 more power for the next few. Like, really, or if you get 3, it's +3, and then if like the next ones are 6 and then 9, and then it just gets bigger and bigger as you destroy more. So I really, really like this style of card. However, this card in particular kind of falls in a weird spot. The problem with it is, like, if you're playing a normal destroy style, which is where you probably destroy the most cards, taking turn 2 to just play down Weapon X doesn't feel very good. And it feels like it's almost like pulling you away from what you normally want to do. I also tried this in a Thanos destroy. I think it might work a little better in that. But Weapon X just doesn't really have a deck. It could be something where a bit of a deck building puzzle that'll take a bit of time for people to understand the best way to play it. There's a lot of very dedicated destroy players, so I really hope that those super dedicated destroy players can find a way to break this card and make it a little bit better. But the stats are showing, it's at a 48% win rate, 8.5% popularity, but it is cube positive. So it's showing that it's a weird deck that's, I think, getting forced into the wrong decks right now. So maybe over time, we'll be able to figure out a better position and a better place for it. But right now, I don't think that it's a very, very powerful card. Next card we're going to talk about is Adamantium Infusion, which is a 4 energy skill with the ability on reveal, revive your highest power destroyed card here with its power doubled. Now, this card is really interesting because I think that it helps hit a critical mass of like a res style deck for destroy. They used to have Elixir, which is a little bit hard to play because you'd have to like play it at the right time to be the turn after. Then you can also use Phoenix Force, which is just a little expensive, and then you only get +5 power on the card. You can move it, which can be really, really nice, but in general, what Adamantium Infusion does, if you destroy a big card with something like Kid Omega or Venom, then you're able to hold on to that power with the Kid Omega or Venom, and then you're able to respawn that power with double. Really, really powerful. It's been seen in some like Nimrod Shuri stuff. There's just some like Black Panther style things that have been using it. But a really, really interesting card, and the stats are good. 52% win rate, 4% popularity, 0.11 cubes per game. All the stats that I take for all these videos is top 50% infinite, which is a little bit weird, especially early in the season because not too many people are hitting that threshold. But I think that overall, Adamantium Fusion is a great new addition to the game, a very, very powerful card if you can get access to it. Next card is going to be the surprise of last week to me, which was Chamber. When I first saw Chamber, I thought Chamber was going to be pretty solid. Seemed like a decent card. I was trying to run it. I actually ran a really interesting deck with it where I was using She-Hulk and the High Evolution Abomination and a bunch of like ways to hit your opponent, then moon girling my hand and then hoping that Chamber was down to play it and get like +4 on it. Its abilities activate +2 power for each 5 cost or higher card you have here and in hand. So if you play a 5 cost card on top of Chamber, it will still add that and all of the cards that are still in your hand. But what people have found, shout out to Smiles, SMLZ, if you ever see them on the ladder. I think they were the first person to crack this deck. Like a new version of Ramp really emerged, where you were using Electro and Luna Snow. You were using Enchantress and Blink to get rid of the Electro if you had to, using a ton of 5 power cards, a couple of 6 power cards, and then also using Valentina and Iron Patriot to add more cards for Chamber into your hand. And boy, oh boy, Chamber gets massive. I played the deck and was really happy to be one of the first people who got a hold of it. So I was playing it when people weren't really ready for it. And it's just amazing how powerful Chamber was in that deck. You were getting 13 power Chambers all the time, sometimes up to 15. And like the floor was like 11, which is pretty insane for a 2-cost card. It was kind of in a weird position where like you couldn't play Blink because you had just played Chamber the turn before, and you can't get rid of the Chamber because it's going to be 11. You're going to blink it into your deck. It's going to become a worse card. But an absolutely smash success of a card. If you weren't able to get Chamber, hopefully you can get it a little bit later. But really, really powerful. 0.44 average cubes, almost a 60% win rate and 16% popularity. Kind of taking over the ladder, this ramp style deck. And what's really cool is that there's different versions of it coming out now, with War Machine going to a 5/9, which we'll talk about later. That became another way to play after Electro. And people are then using like things like Infinite and Ebony Maw and kind of making all these different versions of the deck from the original idea. So really, really awesome card, a card that I think a lot of people overlooked. Very, very powerful. And then the next one is not that powerful. It's Wade Wilson, which is the 2 energy, 2 power with the ability when destroyed, replace this with a 1-cost card from your hand or deck with +1 power. Does not really doing too well. It has negative cube rate, it has negative win rate, it has about 3% popularity. Kind of falls into a similar situation that Weapon X is, where it doesn't really fit into the defined destroy archetype, which has been mastered by so many people. So it's probably going to take a little time for Wade Wilson to work out. It does have some interesting ways to like deck thin, or if you're trying to tutor out a specific 1-cost card like Moira, if like that's one of your only cards that you have, you can pull it out. I was trying it in some weird like Airwalker Moon Girl style stuff, and it's okay. I think that this card is interesting. I mean, it's trying to like pull Deadpool and give it +1 power, right? The problem is just a little too slow, because you play this on 2 and then you destroy it on 3. The first time you're going to get access to hitting that Deadpool is going to be on turn 4, and that's just a little too slow, I think, a lot of times for these destroy style decks. So an interesting card. I think it could be pretty cool, but overall, it's just not really in a position to succeed right now. Maybe it'll just take a little bit more tinkering and working through, but it was a card that everyone was pretty easily able to get through the limited time mode, which is why you see a little bit more popularity than from what the win rate and the average cubes would show. Moving on, let's talk about the OTA. So the OTA was a little over a week ago, or a little less than a week ago. And we saw a lot of different changes. So thank you. Shout out to Marvel Snap Zone again for this little graphic. But just to talk about some of the changes that I'm not going to discuss further, we saw some small buffs to things like Swordmaster and Elsa Bloodstone. Haven't really seen too much of a difference from those. We also saw a small buff to the Helicarrier, going from 610 to 612. Can be pretty nice if you're doing like a Ghost Rider Helicarrier style deck, but those decks just feel not that strong. I don't know if Helicarrier is really going to push the envelope there. The other big one was Spider-Man Noir, going from a 4/6 to a 4/4, but now it's on reveal is to set the top card of your deck's power to 8, and if your other cards in play cost exactly 8 total, add it here. So it raised the floor up of Spider-Man Noir quite a bit, but lowered the ceiling as well. And I think that's really good. I think that Spider-Man Noir was way harder to get off than people anticipated. So having that change, I think, is really good. I don't think the card's that great. I think people were like super hyped on it, but I don't know. I'm not super sold that the card's like insane. Obviously, when you get a really high roll with it, it can be great, but you're still playing a 4/4, which feels really, really rough nowadays. I still think that if you're going to play Spider-Man Noir, your deck should be built to be able to get its full effect off, to get exactly 8 cards in play. But I think some people disagree with that, and some people aren't as open to that side of things. I don't know. I haven't seen too much Spider-Man Noir since, so I guess we'll see. But for the OTA, I wanted to talk about 2 cards I think that they really hit the nail on the head with, and 2 cards they kind of missed with. Starting with the cards that I think were really, really good changes, which is War Machine and Human Torch. War Machine got moved from a 4/6 ongoing to a 5/9, and you'll see it still has really, really solid stats. This was kind of technically a nerf or more of a change. What I think is really cool is that War Machine got much better in like Electro style decks that already wanted to have him, because you play Electro and then immediately play War Machine and open things up. But it really makes it much, much, much harder to play that like kind of toxic Storm War Machine Legion combo, which was just so kind of easy to do for a while. So really, really nice that they made that change. The card is still seeing play, but it's not as toxic. And honestly, when you're making changes in Marveled Snap, in my opinion, that's really where that's like the sweet spot. That's what you want to be hitting. You want the card to still be playable and still have ways to use it, but to not make things feel bad. And the card still seems really good. I think it's being used in a lot of those chamber ramp decks that we saw, which probably points to some of why the stats are so good being used in that deck. But overall, a really, really solid change. I'm happy they finally got rid of that. It's not gone, but very, very hard to set up now. You have to do multiple things. You have to use like a Jennifer Kale or something like that to set it up. So really, really nice that they're kind of listening to the community that doesn't like that side of things and adjusting War Machine in the right way. The other thing is the Human Torch going from a 3/3 to a 3/2, really lowering the power cap that Human Torch can hit. 1 power is a lot in any card in Marvel Snap. I always say that. A lot of people don't agree with me on that. But I think that 1 power is pretty important in Marvel Snap top to bottom. But one power on a card that is doubling multiple times in a game just ends up being a lot of power at the end of the day to how much 1 power actually cuts off. And you'll see that the popularity went way, way down to just under 2% popularity. Negative win rate, but a very, very strong cube rate. I think that the way to look at this is that because there's not too many people playing it anymore, the counters are going away. There's much less Mercury, probably a little bit less Shadow King than we've been used to seeing. So because the overall power level of the deck is down, the amount that people are teching around it is down, so the card is still able to perform for the few people who still want to utilize it. But I think that if it ever starts to hit that critical mass and the counters start to come up, the deck isn't as able to deal with those counters. So I think that it was a really, really good change by them. Really nice that it still seems to be working for those people who still really, really love move and not really terrorizing the top of ladder. You might not think Human Torch would be that crazy depending on where you're at in the ladder, but at the very top of ladder, there's some very, very just incredibly good move players who know how to use this card to perfection, and it is really, really tough to deal with them. So losing a power there, still seeing success, that's exactly what I want to see. Let's talk about the bad ones. I think that the first bad one would be Dormammu. Really didn't push the needle with Dormammu, I think, by buffing it. Maybe got a little more popularity, but still not really seeing too much from win rate or average cubes. Pretty low sample size, so kind of decent, right? I think they need to just find something else to do with Dormammu. The other problem is that a lot of these stats might just be people who aren't even using Dormammu for the effect. Just having a 0 cost on reveal for like wolf decks is something that people have been using with it. So I think that's kind of what's happening. And then a little bit more power on Dormammu is fine, but I think they just need to go back to the drawing board with Dormammu. Maybe rework how some of the skills work. Maybe rework the reward a little bit. I'm not exactly sure, but I think that it's a very interesting card, and they've just been kind of moving the power up and down, and I don't think it's really been making that much of a difference. Really like to see them take a bit more of a touch with Dormammu. The other one is Morgan Le Fay, and I think I'm a lot higher on Morgan Le Fay's change than other people. I do think that for the problem with Morgan Le Fay is that when Morgan Le Fay first came out, I was really, really in love with it. I made this like Necrobouncer deck that I still really love. But then Airwalker came out, and then the way that you played Morgan Le Fay really changed. And there was like some Dormammu Morgan Le Fay going on because Airwalker's a 3/3 that when it's destroyed can pull a 4 cost. That synergy went away with this change. So even though she's cheaper, it's easier to get her effect off. I think that losing that Airwalker synergy has kind of led the community to not know what to do with her. I don't know. I think that this was an interesting one. I think that they probably could have went with 3/5 on her and it would have made her feel a little bit better. But like 3/4, it's just like the card doesn't feel too impactful on the board. And also when you're like doing this Morgan Le Fay synergy and you're like rezzing these other small cards, having that 4/7 felt really powerful in a lane when you can like support it with other things. But taking up a lane spot for 4 power, and then you're usually doing like 6 power, 5 power stuff. It can kind of just feel like it falls behind a little bit. I personally am pretty big on Morgan Le Fay. If you're someone who tried Morgan Le Fay immediately after the change and didn't love it, what I would say is just really try and go back to how you were playing Morgan Le Fay before Airwalker came out. And I think that you can find a lot more success because I've found a lot of fun with Morgan Le Fay. I think that the fact that you can play like Carnage Morgan Le Fay on the same turn is really powerful. Or if you have Bullseye down, you could play oh man, I don't know what the card is. The 2/2 bounce card, the 2/2 bounce card to pull all of the cards back into your hand and then activate Bullseye. throw those cards away, and then Morgan Le Fay all in the same turn. So I think that there is a lot of positive things here. I think with Morgan Le Fay, especially going down to 4 power, you need to have alternative win conditions. Not that you can't find her very consistently, like we were able to do with Airwalker. Kind of had 2 cards you were looking for as opposed to 1. So you really need to work with Morgan Le Fay having like alternate lines. I've really liked trying to use like a Dakin and Frigga line, along with Nico, to sometimes get the copy spell as like a sideline in case you don't draw Morgan Le Fay. But it really just kind of goes back and forth. I think they missed the mark a little bit. I think it's just on the power. I do think it's okay for her to be down to a 3 energy, and I think that there are really cool things from there. But just her power level being to 4, I feel like made it just feel not enough for people to like it. So I'd love for them to adjust her up to 3-5, but I still personally really like it. I think it just maybe missed the mark a little bit, or the community maybe needs to test it a little bit more to find better decks for her. And last but not least, we're going to be talking about Grand Arena. I forgot I made this graphic. So Grand Arena, it's still going, and they did make some changes, which I think are good. I think the biggest miss with Grand Arena was having it come out over a weekend and not being ready to like make quick balance changes to a game mode where you can only use pre-constructed decks. I think that the idea of using only pre-constructed decks is pretty interesting, and I'm really happy they tested it. I think that a big thing that the community can do, and this isn't just Marvel Snap, this is every gaming community. I think that a lot of times the community doesn't actually know what they want, or like the overall community doesn't want, but people will be very loud that something is just like wrong and the right thing or the wrong thing. I personally just like when companies test. So what I think they basically did here is they made a test. Say, hey, we're going to test doing this pre-con. We're going to see, are people actually playing less? Do people actually like it? Do people not like it? But the problem is that this mode came out and it very quickly became obvious that Black Panther was just way better than every other deck. If you were looking at the stats on Untapped, there was a point where this deck had like a 61% win rate, and no other of the 7 decks had over a 50% win rate. There's obviously just something wrong there where one card is dominating the amount of games in the meta. It is by far the most played deck, and then those mirror matches actually bring down the win rate. So like the win rate against other decks was probably like nearing 70%, honestly, which is crazy, right? It's just absolutely crazy to have a deck that was just this off. And this rock paper scissors thing, I was going to say it's kind of like rock paper scissors when you're with precon, but this time it just felt like it was rock versus paper, where every other deck was rock and then they were fine against each other, but then there was just Black Panther that was paper that just beat everything. And it just kind of like very quickly went to where people weren't super interested in playing it. And then it took them a long time to make these balance changes. You know, the balance changes didn't come out until the next Tuesday, which was yesterday. And like people are already just kind of not really about it, and they nerfed Black Panther a bunch, and maybe it's a lot of fun, but I personally wasn't really excited to jump back in. Also, there was some really bad misses on the heroes, man. Like where Thanos starts in your hand, which makes Space Stone actually not draw a card, which makes it much harder to get all of the stones and Thanos in play, to have your skill that also starts in your hand and actually caused hand clogging issues. Like the fact that the skill starts in your hand was actually a negative because it took up space in your hand. So sometimes you were like missing draws with your stones or had to play in weird orders to not miss draws with your stones. And then to have the skill be a 4 cost that you had to have played all of the stones and played Thanos to get like a pretty good effect of destroying your opponent's front row cards. Like that was pretty good, but it was just crazy. It was just really, I feel like it was a massive miss. And then the deck was a nightmare too, because the deck had just had all these giant cards in it. And if you don't draw the stones, you're just kind of dead drawing the whole game while your opponent does all this crazy stuff and then you lose. And then their idea for what to change with it was to make the skill go from 4 costs to 2 costs, which was not the problem. It was not the problem at all. So I think that was a pretty big miss. I think that they really missed on the construction of some of the decks, like where Black Panther just felt very, very strong compared to the others. And then, yeah, like even like the Annihilus deck, right? Like the Annihilus deck, it had all of these ways to like use Hazmat and the skill and Laufey, and I think even had Yellow Jacket. And it seemed like it was this deck where you'd want to play rocks on your side, get them to negative, and then send them over. But then the only way to generate rocks with that deck was Rhino. So it felt like the deck was just constructed wrong to like have this idea, but then not have part of what makes the idea work. Yeah, I think that pre-constructed decks, I think that I'm more open to them than I think in general a lot of the community is. But I think if they were to do it again, the first thing would be to not release it over the weekend so that they can make a balance update within 2 days of it coming out. I think that would have really, really made people much more open to enjoying and playing this game mode, as if they hadn't made that change. And then the other thing would be just maybe doing a little bit more with deck testing. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what happened with the deck testing, but just making the decks feel a little bit more fair, and being more on top of changing them and being open to changing them. I think that if like, this released over the week and they just like threw out changes to the decks every single day, which I don't know, maybe they don't have the bandwidth to do that. That could definitely be the case. I think if they did that, people would be really excited and they'd want to come back every day because it was different every single time. And if something got too powerful, then they change other things. So maybe if there's something where it's just hard to get all of that set up on their back end, I could totally understand that. But I think releasing it over the weekend and then waiting 4 days to make a change really, really just didn't feel good for a lot of people. And it made them want to not enjoy the deck or enjoy the game mode pretty quickly. That's it. Thank you so much for watching Bing Spants. A couple things I do want to say at the end. First of all, I have ears. You might have never seen my ears since I've been streaming, but I figured since I'm not actually listening to music, you get to see my ears during this. So, hashtag Binks ears in the comments if you got to see my ears at the end or the whole time. Maybe you've already done the hashtag, and then now I'm saying this and it feels like I'm reading your mind, which I am. Second thing is I just want to really be accountable for making this weekly series work. It's supposed to come out every single Monday. It's obviously coming out on Wednesday. So I just really want to hold myself accountable. Being accountable for things that I promise to the community is something that I don't think I've done a very good job of for my whole time of being a content creator. It's something that I have a very, very big want to do, and it's really something that I'm putting time with. So I'll try and communicate if it ever is late like this again, but I really want to keep doing this as a really, really awesome outlet for me to be able to talk about some things that I normally don't get to talk to, and just kind of have fun as a content creator in a really cool way. So I'm really excited for this. Keep getting excited for Bing Spans to come out every single week. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. And do you hear that? Do you hear that? It's the song. Binks, Binks, Binks. I hope you like the vibe. Binks, Binks. Like and subscribe. Binks, Binks. I hope you like the vibe. Binks, Binks. Like and subscribe.